Welcome to Keep It Electric. You're tuned in to episode 59, currently being recorded on this Friday, October the 18th. Before diving into all things Mariners, let's quickly catch up on what's happening around the league in the MLB playoffs. If you've been following along, you know we're seeing some wildly different narratives play out in each of these series. First up, let's talk about last night's Yankees-Guardians game. The Yankees, who had a 2-0 lead in the series, they fumbled a prime opportunity to go up 3-0. And I've got to say, this one kind of caught me by surprise. Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton hit back-to-back home runs off Emmanuel Clase, who, by the way, was lights out all regular season. Things look to be in the Yankees' favor, but the thing about baseball is it's never over until it's over. Luke Weaver, who's also been lights out, comes in to close the game out for New York, and when you think it's wrapped up, Big Christmas smacks a 2-run shot to tie it. The Guardians weren't done. In the bottom of the 10th, David Fry stepped up and launched a 2-run walk-off homer to win at 7-5. The series now sits at 2-1, and the Guardians still have 2 games back in Cleveland. If they can ride this momentum, we could be looking at them going up 3-2 in the series. And the Yankees, they definitely need to bounce back immediately, or this one could just spiral out of control for them. As for the Dodgers and the Mets, this one, to me, is just a little strange. The Dodgers are up 3-1 and could close things out tonight with Jack Flaherty on the mound going up against David Peterson for the Mets. The odd part here is that this series has really lacked drama. There's been plenty of runs, and that part is kind of entertaining, but all 4 of these games have been blowouts. The Dodgers blew the Mets out in Game 1, 9-0. The Mets took Game 2, 7-3. Then the Dodgers came back with 2 straight blowouts, 8-0 in Game 3, and then 10-2 last night in Game 4. It's like watching a heavyweight fight where one punch lands, and that's all it takes. Basically, one team goes up, and the other team just tends to pack it in and move on to the next night. So the entertainment factor is just not there when every game is just lopsided like this. But tonight, the Dodgers are in prime position to close this thing out and get some rest ahead of the World Series if it works out for them. I don't expect them to mess around or give the Mets a chance to claw back into the series. The Dodgers seem laser focused on getting this thing done, and they'll likely take care of business tonight. Now that we've covered the playoff scene, let's get into the main event of today's episode, the Seattle Mariners. We've got a lot to unpack when it comes down to second base, so without further ado, let's dive in. All right, so we are in the second ever segment of Trey's Grades. That's right. I might yell the name every time. Trey's Grades. It's got a good ring to it and brings a bit of nostalgia for me. For those of you who don't know, the name originally came from a roast session I used to do after one of my annual fantasy football drafts in my local league. It's all in good fun, and honestly, it just stuck. So why not bring that energy here to the podcast? Those who know, you know. So it won't be the same energy, a little bit of a different environment, but, you know, a refactored Trey's Grades, if you will. So today we're taking a deep look at the Mariners' second base situation, which, let's be honest, it's been a bit of a revolving door for the last several seasons. Second base has been the most, definitely the most unstable position for the Mariners in its most recent seasons. It's felt like a bit of a black hole. The team's been rotating player after player since Robinson Cano was shipped off in 2018. So every year since, we've had a different opening day starter at second base. Let's run through this history for a second. So in 2019, we had D. Strange Gordon. Then we had Shed Long. Remember him in 2020? Then it was Dylan Moore in 2021. Adam Frazier in 2022. Colton Wong in 2023. And then Jorge Polanco in 2024. That's 6 years, 6 different starters. That kind of instability really shows how much second base has been a glaring issue for the team. It's been a conversation almost every offseason. Actually, it's been a conversation every offseason since 2019. So looking at this past 2024 season, it seems like Jorge Polanco was supposed to be the answer. He started 112 games at second, far more than anyone else on the roster. Let's not forget about the other guys who did have to step in, especially when he got injured. We saw Dylan Moore there for 37 games. Ryan Bliss had 25. Leo Rivas and Josh Rojas had 11 each at second base. And then we even saw Ty France there starting for a game. So when you add up the contributions from all these guys, the result, well, it's just disappointing. Collectively, the Mariners' second baseman starters combined for the third lowest batting average on the team at 209. Not only that, they also grounded into the most double plays on the roster, so they were just horrible offensively. That's just not going to cut it for the Mariners if they want to compete at a high level, especially at that position. So, what should the Mariners do about second base heading into 2025? This is where I think it gets tricky. In the last episode, I talked about first base, and my take was pretty clear. The Mariners don't need to do much there. Resign Justin Turner on a vet friendly deal and keep developing Tyler Locklear. Second base, I think the story is slightly different. The Mariners have already said that they don't plan on making any big splashes in free agency, but the truth is, the infield was by far the weakest part of the team in 2024, so things definitely need to change. Second base, in my opinion, was the weakest link in that chain. So let's take a look at the upcoming class of free agents to see what options, if any, are realistic for Seattle. First, we have Jose Iglesias. He's turning 35, and while he had a solid second half with the Mets, I just don't see the Mariners on the market for a pop artist. So I don't think they're going for him. Ha-Sung Kim from the Padres, he's another option. He's got a mutual option with San Diego, and even if he does hit the market, I doubt Seattle would pursue him. Gleyber Torres, no, just no. When it comes to utility guys, there are names like Brandon Drury and Adam Frazier. Let's talk about Frazier for a second because we've already seen this story. He was an experiment gone wrong in 2022. I think he was coming off of an All-Star year, but it was a disaster. Frazier got crushed by the shift, though. Like, seriously, if the shift hadn't been in play that year, Frazier probably would have hit over 300. That's just my opinion. If you look at it, he had an extremely low K rate. He was hitting the ball hard. He was hitting line drives. The only problem is that he was hitting hard liners that ended up in the glove of a second baseman playing shallow right. I mean, the new shift, the new MLB rules, if that was in effect in 2022, Adam Frazier might actually still be a Mariner. I think he would have been really good. So I'm not advocating for a Frazier reunion. I think we're past that. T-Mobile Park was way too big for him as well. So, I doubt the Mariners are going to go down that road again. Other names to consider, they include Garrett Hampson. Garrett Hampson is not going to provide any real offensive spark, so I don't see that happening. We have Whit Merrifield, who I see as just an older, faster version of Adam Frazier. Then there are a few guys with club options in 2025 who might become available, like Kyle Farmer, Wilmer Flores, Brandon Lau, and Miguel Rojas. Out of those names, Lau is probably the most intriguing and maybe the most logical, but again, it's hard to say if any of these players would be a true solution to the Mariners' second base problem. So where does that leave us? The Mariners are likely to roll the dice on a low-cost free agent or stick with in-house options. Personally, I'm not convinced Jorge Polanco should return as a starter in 2025. He's serviceable, sure, but I think we've seen enough to know he's not the long-term answer. Maybe Ryan Bliss or Dylan Moore gets a shot to compete for the starting role next year, but honestly, this feels like a position where the Mariners could really benefit from developing a young prospect or swinging a trade. So let's dig into the second base conundrum for the Mariners. If you've been following along, you know that second base has been a bit of a headache for this team over the last few years. So we've cycled through names, tried different strategies. So here we go. Given the names of the upcoming free agent market, I have to be honest, I wouldn't pick any of those over Polanco. Polanco didn't have the year we all hoped for in 2024, but banking on him not repeating that poor performance seems like a safer bet than taking a flyer on an aging or underwhelming free agent. That said, my issue with Polanco staying on this roster goes beyond just his 2024 performance. Here's the sticking point. He's due for $12 million next year. The Mariners have the option to buy him out for $750,000, and in a year when the front office is openly discussing budget constraints, Polanco simply isn't worth $12 million. He's not producing at a level that justifies that. So, especially from a team that needs every dollar to count, if they want to improve the roster, they should spend that money elsewhere. So, it does get a little interesting. Before the Mariners can even think about buying out Polanco's contract, I believe they're going to try to trade him. He's definitely a potential trade trip, and I'm confident the Mariners will look to find a team that's willing to take on his contract, hopefully in exchange for some prospects. Now, who would want Polanco? That's tricky and interesting, but I would say it would probably be a contender looking to add a veteran infielder without completely breaking their bank. One scenario that makes sense to me is to deal him to the San Diego Padres. The Padres might be looking to move away from Ha Sung Kim, who could be a free agent this offseason if they both agree to it. Polanco might fit into their lineup as a veteran piece. He would definitely fit into that lineup offensively. I think if you look at a similar situation like Teoscar Hernandez in LA, like put a bat like that in between other threats, that bat ends up getting better. So Polanco, I could see him fitting in San Diego. The Padres and the Mariners have a bit of trade history, so this deal feels plausible. San Diego doesn't tend to hold on to their prospects unless you're talking about someone like Jackson Merrill. So I could see them being willing to part way with what prospects they do have left in their organization in return for Polanco. Another intriguing trade partner could be the Tampa Bay Rays. They've been a consistent trade partner for the Mariners. A swap involving Brandon Lowe could work out for both sides. Like Polanco, Loud had a bit of a down year. A change of scenery might be exactly what both of these players need. So Lau, he also has some pop at second base, but the Mariners could use that. He's also had some success at T-Mobile Park. In fact, it's a small sample size, but he's had 9 career games at T-Mobile Park. He's hit 241 and 3 home runs. So it's a small sample, sure, but it's worth noting that all of his homers against the Mariners were in T-Mobile. So that gives me a little bit of excitement, much like when we traded for Luke Raley. Luke Raley was another left-handed hitter with pop. He's another left-handed batter who hit well in T-Mobile Park against us. So if the Mariners can land Lau, it wouldn't necessarily be an upgrade. It would feel more like a lateral move, but it would be an affordable option and provides probably similar consistency. So the next option would be prospects. So I know I mentioned Tyler Locklear in a previous episode. Today I want to focus on Cole Young. Cole Young, he was the Mariners' first round pick in 2022. He plays second base and shortstop. He's fluid between them both. He's a number 2 prospect in the system. He's been developing nicely. His timeline seems to align with a potential call up in 2025. He crushed it at the plate in single A and high A ball. He doesn't showcase much power. He hit 9 home runs last year, but let's keep in mind that was in Double A Arkansas, where home runs are hard to come by at Dickey Stevens Park. So while I don't think Young will be on the opening day roster, the organization does expect him to be in uniform at some point during the 2025 season. I believe that they do. So his performance during the all season and spring training will be crucial. If he proves to be ready, we could see him sooner rather than later. However, if the Mariners decide Young needs more time to develop, I think we'll likely see a combination of Dylan Moore, Ryan Bliss, or even Josh Rojas handling second base next season. So I'm a big fan of Ryan Bliss. I think he's shown flashes of what he could bring to the lineup. I do wish we got a longer lens with to view him last year. I would love to see him get a shot as the everyday second baseman in 2025, but I think the Mariners are probably looking for a safer option. And if they are looking for a safer option, they should go with Josh Rojas. Now, remember when we first acquired Rojas, the idea was that he'd take over at second base, but things changed when the Mariners moved away from Gino and then they brought in Polanco. Rojas still makes sense as a stopgap option. So especially if the Mariners are focusing on upgrading third base, which I'll be covering in more detail in a future episode, I think Rojas might be the starter at second base next season. So I think the other thing is, like, we need to talk about why we're moving away from Polanco. If you look at the advanced stats, Polanco's wins above replacement was significantly lower than both Dylan Moore and Josh Rojas. Over a point, actually. So I think that's pretty telling. Moore actually had a sneaky good season when you look at his overall impact, and then you look at last year compared to the year before. He's healed from some injuries. He's kind of back to knowing himself, and he's performing better. He's a player who, when he's healthy, he brings value, even if it's not always flashy. So while Polanco has a bigger name and a bigger contract, Moore and Rojas, they've quietly outperformed him in key areas. So when it comes down to the final grade, initially I was thinking about giving the Mariners the second base unit a C- for the past season. But after reviewing the numbers and taking everything into account, I think a C- is actually too generous. So I'm dropping the grade to a D. I think the Mariners' second base unit gets a D for their performance this past season. Second base is a glaring weakness, and it's a position that needs immediate attention heading into 2025. So, could Cole Young be the long term answer? Yeah, I think so. But unless he absolutely blows everyone away in spring training, I don't think it makes sense to rush him onto the opening day roster. Still, the idea of him being a dark horse rookie of the year candidate is exciting. And with prospect promotion incentives, there's a real reason we could see him earlier in the season than expected if the Mariners think that they're ready. So, to wrap up, I think we're looking at another transitional year at second base. If the Mariners can find a trade partner for Polanco, I expect them to roll with a combination of Rojas, Moore, or Bliss until Cole Young is ready to make the leap. Either way, the position needs to be addressed, and we'll be keeping a close eye on any moves the front office makes in the coming months. So that's it for today's segment of Trey's Grades. In the next few episodes, I'll be taking a closer look at third base. Stay tuned for that. Whatever happens, second base will be the most crucial position to watch for this offseason. So that will bring us to the end of the episode. I hope you enjoyed diving into the second base situation with me, and I appreciate you all for sticking around for this in-depth look at where the Mariners stand heading into 2025. Now, looking ahead to the next episode, we're shifting focus to the shortstop position. I think that's going to be a super interesting conversation, especially when you consider who has been our opening day shortstop for the last 5 seasons. So, as always, I want to thank you for tuning in to Keep It Electric and for being a part of the conversation. We'll continue with Trey's Grades next week, so be sure to join us as we break down yet another key piece of the Mariners puzzle. Whether you're listening on your commute, at home, or during your lunch break, I really appreciate the time you take to support the show. I hope everyone has a fantastic weekend, and as always, go Mariners!